Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're looking at a story that really changed how medicine and the law interact with each other.
It's a huge one.
Yeah, it's about this fundamental tension between, being fair to a rural doctor who might be working with limited tools and the right of a patient to get competent care no matter their zip code.
Mm,
We're asking a very specific question today. Does the law expect the same level of care from a surgeon in, say, a top Boston hospital as it does from a surgeon in a small town in Mississippi?
and for a very long time, the answer to that was, surprisingly, no. The system basically said if you live in a small town, you get small town care.
But that's not the world we live in anymore.
Not at all. And today we're going to walk through the landmark case that completely shattered that idea. We're looking at the 1985 Mississippi Supreme Court case, Hall v. Hilbun.
This is the case that killed the old locality rule.
It is. It's the death knell for the idea that your geography can be an excuse for, well, for medical ignorance. This case gave us what we now call the competence-based national standard of care.
Okay, so how are we going to tackle this?
We need to be really rigorous here. First, we'll define that old world rule to see why it even existed. Then we're going to dissect Hall v. Hilbun with a legal scalpel. Be very precise. And we'll end by building a diagnostic checklist so you can spot these issues instantly.
Perfect. Let's start with that history. I mean, it's easy to look back now and just say, obviously a doctor should be competent. But the old locality rule, it didn't just appear out of thin air, did it?
No, not at all. Originally, it was about fairness. I mean, think about it from the perspective of, say, 1880. You have a doctor in rural Mississippi. He's got a black bag, maybe a horse.
Right. He's an island.
He's an island. He's delivering babies, setting legs. He isn't reading the latest journals from London. He can't consult with a specialist. So the court said, look, it is just unfair to hold this guy to the same standard as a professor at Harvard.
So they created the locality rule.
They did. The black-letter law was that a physician is bound to exercise the care and skill of physicians in good standing in the same neighborhood or locality.
In the same neighborhood. That sounds, I don't know, cozy. But that phrase became a real problem, legally speaking.
It became a massive shield for negligence. The rule had two parts. First, the standard itself. Your duty was just to be as good as your neighbors. If your neighbors were all behind the times, well, that was the standard.
And the second part.
The second part was evidentiary, and this was the real killer. It said that an expert witness could only testify against a doctor if they practiced in that same specific locality.
So wait, if a doctor in a small town botches your surgery, you have to find another doctor from that exact same town to get on the stand and say, yeah, my colleague messed up.
Exactly. And you can imagine how often that happened.
Never. I mean, these people golf together. Their kids are in the same school.
It was social suicide. The courts even called it the conspiracy of silence. Local doctors just would not testify against each other. So if you couldn't find a local expert, your case was just thrown out. It didn't matter how bad the mistake was.
So in practice, the standard of care was basically whatever the local doctors could get away with.
Pretty much. If the local custom was sloppy, then sloppy was the legal standard. And that finally brings us to 1978 in Pascagoula, Mississippi, and the tragic case of Hall v. Hilbun. This is where that whole system just broke.
Let's analyze Hall v. Hilbun. First, just to anchor us, what are the legally dispositive facts?
Okay, the key facts are these. Terry Hall went in for abdominal surgery for a bowel obstruction. The surgeon was Dr. Hilbun, a general surgeon.
And the surgery itself, was that the problem?
No, and this is a crucial point. The surgery was technically successful. He fixed the obstruction. The problem started after the surgery.
What happened?
The surgery ended. Dr. Hilbun checked on her in recovery, and then at 2:50 p.m., he left the hospital. He went home. He was on call, but he never called to check in. He gave the nurses no specific instructions for what to do if, she started to decline. He just checked out.
So he went home to relax. What was happening with Mrs. Hall?
She was in a lot of pain, so the nurses gave her morphine, which can suppress breathing. Her husband, Glenn, was at her bedside and noticed she was struggling to breathe. He ran to the nurses.
And what did they do?
They told him it was normal. They didn't call the doctor.
Normal.
Yeah. Later, her husband found her not breathing at all. She was turning blue. She died of respiratory failure.
Now, I have to ask about something I read in the file. The sponge.
Yes, the sponge. It's a classic red herring. An autopsy did find a surgical sponge left inside her. And yes, that is negligent. But the court was very clear. The sponge did not cause her death. The cause of death was the complete lack of post-op monitoring. So for our analysis, the sponge is a distraction. The issue is the abandonment.
Okay, so Glenn Hall sues, but he can't find any local doctors to testify.
He can't. He runs straight into that conspiracy of silence. So he hires two highly qualified experts from Cleveland, Ohio.
And at trial, the judge says,
What? The judge applies the old locality rule. He says, these guys are from Ohio. They don't know the standard of care in Pascagoula, Mississippi. He excluded their testimony.
and with no expert, the case is over.
Directed verdict for Dr. Hilbun. The plaintiff loses. And that's the decision that went up to the Mississippi Supreme Court.
And what was the core legal issue the Supreme Court had to answer?
The issue was essentially, should the locality rule be used to disqualify perfectly good experts just because they're from another state? And as a result, what is the proper standard of care for a specialist in the modern world?
What rule of law did the court apply? Please state the full black-letter rule and break it down into its testable elements.
Okay, so the court completely abolished the old locality rule. They replaced it with a new two-part rule, a competence-based national standard with a resource-based caveat.
Two elements. What's the first one?
The first is the competence element. This is the national standard. It says a physician has to use the care and skill of a minimally competent physician in the same specialty anywhere in the United States.
And the second part?
The second part is the resource element. This is the local caveat. It says a doctor only has a duty to use the facilities, services, and options that are reasonably available in their specific location.
Thank you. Now for the court's elemental analysis. Let's walk through this step by step. How did the court apply the first element, the competence element, national standard?
Okay, so for this element, the Mini-IR Act goes like this. The sub-issue was, does your location change what you should know as a doctor?
And the court's reasoning?
The court basically said medicine has nationalized, medical schools are standardized, board certifications are national. The court had this great line, something like, bones break and heal in Washington the same as in Florida.
Right, a fever is a fever everywhere.
Exactly. So in their application, they said the knowledge of how to monitor a patient after this type of surgery is universal. It's a competence issue. It doesn't change when you cross the state line into Mississippi.
So their conclusion on that element was that the Ohio experts were qualified to testify.
Absolutely. They were qualified to speak on Dr. Hilbun's competence, or lack thereof.
Understood. So the knowledge, the brain, must be national. Now what about the second element, the resource element, local caveat?
This is where the court showed it was still grounded in reality. The sub-issue here is, can we blame a doctor for not having fancy equipment that doesn't exist in their town?
And the rule is no, you can't.
Right. The rule is based on fairness. A rural doctor isn't liable for failing to use, say, a C scanner if their clinic doesn't have one. They're held to the standard of what's reasonably available.
So how'd they apply that to Dr. Hilbun's case?
Well, the court looked at the facts. Did Mrs. Hall die because the hospital was missing some high-tech machine? No. She died because her doctor went home. He failed to use the resources he did have.
Like the telephone.
The telephone, the nurses, his own presence. So the court's conclusion on this element was that the resource caveat didn't help him one bit. The resources needed to save her were available. He just failed to use them.
And after analyzing all the elements, what was the court's final conclusion?
The Supreme Court of Mississippi reversed and remanded. They said it was a major error to exclude the Ohio experts. The plaintiff had a right to use them to establish that national standard of competence.
That distinction is so critical, the national brain versus the local resources. I want to cement this with a hypothetical.
Let's do it. I call this one the Bayou versus the big city.
Okay.
Scenario A. We're in a top-tier Boston hospital. A cardiologist looks at an EKG. It's a textbook heart attack. But he's tired, rushes, misreads it as indigestion, sends the patient home. The patient dies. Is he liable?
I'm going to say yes. Reading an EKG is pure knowledge, competence.
You got it. Liable.
Yeah.
He breached the national competence standard. Doesn't matter if he's in Boston or Boise, a cardiologist is expected to know that.
Okay, now flip it for me.
Scenario B. Now we're in a tiny flooded clinic in rural Mississippi. The roads are washed out. A patient comes in. Our doctor, Dr. Jones, looks at the EKG, and because he's competent, he correctly identifies the heart attack.
So his competence is good?
His competence is perfect. He knows the patient needs a cath lab immediately. But the clinic doesn't have one, and the ambulance can't get through the floodwaters to transfer the patient. The patient dies. Is Dr. Jones liable?
This feels different. He knew what to do, but he couldn't do it.
Exactly. He's not liable. He is protected by the resource caveat. The law doesn't punish him because his town is poor or the weather is bad. He used the options reasonably available to him.
It's so clear when you put it that way. The failure in the first case is internal in the doctor's head. The failure in the second is external, the environment.
That's the perfect way to put it.
Okay, let's synthesize this. If a listener sees a medical malpractice problem on an exam, what's the step-by-step diagnostic checklist they should run through?
Okay, here is your exam framework. Step 1, check the role. Is the defendant a specialist? If so, forget the old local customs. You are applying the national standard for their competence, period.
Got it. Step 2.
Step 2, isolate the breach. This is the key. You have to ask, was this an error of judgment or an error related to equipment? If it's judgment like misdiagnosing pneumonia geography is irrelevant. But if it's about not using some high-tech test, you have to apply the resource caveat and ask, were that test reasonably available there?
Okay, and step 3.
Step 3, evaluate the expert witness. Does the expert have to be from the defendant's town? No. They just have to know the national standard. But, and this is a key nuance, they also have to be briefed on what resources were actually available to the defendant doctor.
And what's the final takeaway?
Step 4. Step 4 is the so what? The big picture. A doctor can no longer use local custom as a shield. If the local custom is to be lazy or outdated, now, too bad. The national standard is going to override that.
So the locality rule is dead because science doesn't really care about state lines. You deserve a doctor who knows what they're doing no matter where you live.
It's about a baseline of safety and responsibility. And I want to leave you with one final thought.
Okay.
Let's go back to that sponge. The one they left in Mrs. Hall that didn't kill her.
The red herring.
Right. But think about what it symbolizes. Medicine isn't perfect. Humans make mistakes. The law in Hall v. Hilbun isn't demanding perfection. It's not saying Dr. Hilbun had to be a god. It was just saying he had to be present. The court essentially said, we can forgive a lack of resources. We can forgive that you don't have $1 million machine. We might even forgive a storm. But we will not forgive you for ignoring your patient. We won't accept geography as an excuse for a lack of care.
A powerful lesson. That's all for this deep dive into Hall v. Hilbun. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.